Hello YouTube, this is Gabriel Lee. As a lot of gamers and some non-gamers are aware, a lot of people when talking about games refer to the argument between whether or not it is an art form or whether games are art or not, and I think that now still a very large majority of people would say that games are not art, and a growing minority, but still a minority, would say that yes, games are indeed art. And so with this video, I sort of want to talk about why I believe games meet that definition of what art is and are an art form, art medium in and of themselves. And so to start that off, I need to tell you the definition of art. And dictionary.com refers to art as the expression or application of human creative skills and imagination, typically in a visual form such as painting or sculpture, producing works to be appreciated primarily for the beauty or emotional power. Alright, so starting off right off the bat, it's the application of human skill and imagination. And I think that most people, if they stop and think about it, can agree that gaming does indeed have those elements. But some see that the graphics are the skill and imagination, and they don't look down past that to the coding of the gameplay itself. And while graphics themselves do take on a lot of these elements, I think seeing just the graphical side of gaming is really part of the conflict as to whether or not games are art, because really it could just be perceived as an animation, it's similar to a movie or something like that, as the art, and then the game itself isn't necessarily any different from anything else and doesn't stand as an art form on its own. However, gaming's coding to the gameplay does require a lot of skill and a lot of imagination. Just look at how differently games play even within this year. We have, or well, I'll use last year, we have Destiny, which is a very straightforward shooter. It's very clean mechanics that function very, very well at what they're supposed to do. Also in that year we had games like okay, maybe I shouldn't have done it by games in the same year, but we also have indie games like Minecraft, which its gameplay is based on taking away an element of the world and replacing it somewhere else to build something, or repurposing it through your inventory, which really at the end of the day is the same thing as you placing it in the world for a different purpose. It just is disguised through the graphical interface of the recipe maker and things like that. So you have a very widely differing way of playing games, and I know that most gamers are aware of this, and most non-gamers to some degree are aware of this, but they don't understand, I think, or don't realize immediately that that is sort of part of what makes games an art form, in that you can display a skill or an aptitude for coding in one particular way or in another way. And so there is imagination even in the coding of gameplays, because you're thinking of different ways to make inputs react within the world itself. Pac-Man would be an example of very artistic coding. It's a simple, you're running around a maze eating things, and everything is just timed really well to the speed of how Pac-Man moves, how the ghosts move, how the mazes are generated, how he corners, how long it takes him to corner. And it's a very simple idea, but it's very imaginative at the time. There wasn't a whole lot to base that sort of thought off of within gaming. There wasn't a whole lot of code to look at to say, okay, this is how we're going to do it. And it was very technical because we can all agree that Pac-Man still stands up to scrutiny today in just how well it executed what it was imagining. They were able to code these things very precisely, and it just feels very right. A more modern example would be the Dark Souls or the Souls series. And in that, we have a very reactive environment that changes sort of with some decisions into little minor things. But that really isn't the big aspect. It's that everything has very specific, readable movements, and they do it in a readable pattern. Sometimes this does change, and that's the point when Dark Souls becomes very, very difficult. But you're presented these patterns, and you have tools within your character to solve them. And it's sort of a matter of looking at the pattern and then picking the right form to approach the pattern and solve it with. And you have multiple options because there's multiple ways to play your character in Dark Souls, obviously. And a lot of people, I think, overcomplicate it as like an adventure thing, because honestly, at the point when you play it, that is what it feels like. And I'll get to that aspect a little bit later in this video. But on the most basic level, you are presented with a pattern that is a challenge, and you are given tools and given the ability to solve it, and you have to view this pattern and figure it out. And just in the imagination of how well they disguised that these are that is what is just going on is pretty impressive. They technically aren't as affluent because we know that there's a lot of bugs and glitches, but when we look at how complicated and how much just knowledge it would have taken to produce the work as is, gives a little bit more credence to that it is still a very technically skill-intensive event. It just might have been a little bit beyond what they were capable of. Or when we think about how complex coding is and how many parts could go wrong, you just sort of don't know if we in general could be technically capable in terms of coding skills to produce something like that without there being an error at some point through it. Because I mean, even Pac-Man had glitches, we just don't encounter them as frequently because we're looking at simpler code. So I think that I've shown with two examples a really big credence for the technical and imaginative aspects of games in terms of their gameplay, which I think alone should give you a greater appreciation for games in general. Because I mean, if you look at games solely as their inputs and the reactions to those inputs, you can really sort of see just how different the different games are. Portal's different, the Diablo series is different, all of it is more or less different. And I mean, obviously there's stuff that repeat those ideas and do only slightly different thing, but when you look at the ones that you feel are more or less truly unique, and you come down further and further to that truly unique original basis for the idea, you realize really how impressive that original idea is, and you realize how impressive some of the ideas expounding on that are, because it would have taken a lot of creativity to make it feel different, to make it feel like you are playing a different game, and it requires a lot of technical skill to get those balances in the code and how the inputs feel and react just right to make it feel different. But technical skill and imagination isn't enough, because art still needs to be beautiful or imaginative. are beautiful or evoke an emotion, I should say. I meant to say. So I think we can once again agree that graphics are beautiful for a lot of games, or art styles are really beautiful for a lot of things. And so I feel like when people say that games are not art, they're not addressing that at all, um, in regards to what makes it not art or art. They just see the graphics as a visual art form in and of itself that doesn't need the gameplay necessarily to have been produced and exist as an art form. Though, when we think about how dynamic graphics are and how they progress and change, um, I guess we could say that it would be like a film. Would be another way that a game could have been presented, but I feel like the thing that makes games so different from that is that the emotional impact of it truly comes from the fact that you are interacting on such a engaged level with the piece of work. It isn't like you're able to sort of passively interact with it in the same sense that you would be a film or a painting or even a piece of music. You have to actively participate in the experience for you to get more of the experience. And that sort of increases the basic level of emotional expression and intensity that you feel when you're experiencing a game, because you are experiencing something that you are inherently part of. And that, I think, is a big deal. For example, once again, Dark Souls, you are faced with challenges over and over again, and you're going to fail a lot of times, and that's going to cause frustration because you know on some level that it is your fault for not being able to get past the challenge there. It's where the YouTube get good and all that sort of stuff sort of comes from, is that for the most part, most challenges in the Soul series are very fair, very balanced. You just have to be on your A game. And so when you do overcome this challenge, there's a lot of feelings of accomplishment and like pride in what you've done. And the atmosphere of Dark Souls is very grim and depressing and dark, and when you succeed, it sort of steps back for a moment. You feel more like you can conquer these like fears and struggles. And games that are simpler than that, such as Portal, where you figure out the puzzle, still have a feeling of frustration and accomplishment. They can also have just a feeling of pure joy and happiness when you land some portal combination that sends you flying all over the level, and it just feels really exhilarating. Minecraft has a feeling of ownership and creation to it from building things. Same with Terraria, same with a lot of survival crafting games, as you feel a lot of ownership, you feel a lot of creativity, you feel a lot of wonder in those worlds because it is so moldable by you. And I think that in all of those examples, even if the graphics were different, even if the sound was different, you would still more or less experience it as the same feelings that you did in the games in their present state. Those ideas of beauty and excitement, or emotional excitement, are still present in the gameplay itself. And I think that the more you look at what the gameplay itself is doing, the more you start to realize that games are indeed art, and they are an art form. So I think when you next play a game, you should look at that. You should examine what exactly the gameplay is doing and what factors about it and just how right it feels and stuff could be at play, whether it be the timing, the weight, the damage of anything that you do in the game. and just sort of think about that as you're playing a game, and you'll sort of develop a greater appreciation for the game aspect of the game, and you'll sort of start to see why it is an art form. And if you already saw it as an art form, this might give you greater appreciation of it as an art form. It might bring about more feelings for, or a better defined feeling for what it is that you like about games and why you like those things about games, so you can be a more informed participant within the gaming medium. So I would like to thank everyone for watching. If you like this video, like, subscribe, check out some of my other works. I think I'm going to do some more of these how I feel videos and sort of express some more of the thoughts that I have on gaming and games in general, outside of the context of a very specific game like I've been doing. And hopefully you enjoy these. If you do, let me know. If there's anything in particular about gaming that you think I should talk about, let me know also. Gabe Lee, signing out. Stay happy, happy people.